Alrighty guys, so here we are back in Cinema 4D and we've got our Windows Explorer window open with our OBJ directory that we created in SoftImage. This is chapter 6 and we're going to be discussing exporting back to Cinema 4D and working with the motion data in here and reattaching the head to the body. Now on the internet, through my travels, I know a lot of people always been asking on numerous forums, how do you attach a head back to the body once it's detached? And if you recall in chapter 2 of this workflow, we actually basically have our character in the same exact position that the original character was in. And this was, of course, to make it easy for us to reattach the head to the body. Basically, we didn't remove any of the materials. This head, pretty much, for all intents and purposes, is pretty much textured and has all the same materials as if it were actually attached to the body, and nothing's really changed about it. You'll notice in Windows Explorer, in the OBJ directory, I also have 6 MDDs here, and these MDDs, face, left eye, left jaw, or lower jaw, right eye, tongue, and upper jaw, all relate to the meshes that are separate here and the meshes that are also separate in SoftImage. Basically, it generated out a point cache, or point oven, rather, a lightwave point oven for each one of those separate objects. So each one of these objects basically had its own separate vertex animation data, and SoftImage went through and basically created these nice animated files, which are very, very small. They're not very big for all the data that they're holding. And they created these nice files for us. Alright, now this workflow works here in R14 through a plugin called Riptide. And if you've done a lot of Cinema 4D work, you've probably heard of it. Here it is on Spanky's Prop Shop, skinprops.com/riptidepro.php. And basically what this plugin does is it shores up a hole in Cinema 4D in regards to its OBJ export and import capabilities. Cinema 4D has terrible OBJ support. It doesn't import in materials correctly. It changes point orders. It just basically messes all sorts of stuff up. And this plugin is a must for both the ZBrush workflow that we're going to go over in the next tutorial, and it's also a must for this workflow. And it's not because of the OBJ import capability in this particular case, but this plugin has the ability to actually import in MDD caches, and it's that I know of the only plugin that's compatible with R14 that actually allows for that. It also does an amazing job importing in MDDs, especially if you're using the same OBJ files that you exported out initially. In this particular case, we exported this out as FBX, but basically pretty much the exact same concept. Alright, so if we go to the plugin, and we're going to go ahead and select our face, and we go ahead and use the MDD deformer. This will give us the ability to be able to do some parameter changes and basically use this as a deformer. It's really nice. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and add the MDD deformer to her face. And we're basically going to load up an MDD file. If we go into our directory here, we can load up her face, which matches this object. And you'll immediately see that we get a undesirable result. Basically, her face disappeared, and we can't see it, and it's not like it's small or it's not like it's big. Well, it could technically be massive, possibly, but we don't want to zoom all the way out on our scene to be able to actually see it. And besides, we'd probably have to adjust our camera too anyway. But what happened? Well, the way the MDD deformer works, it works kind of similar to the way the point cache works. Basically, if you mess up the point order, you change the vertex count, or you change the basic structure of the actual mesh, it's going to mess things up. If you look back on this tutorial around like chapter 2, I think there was a point where I tried to optimize the mesh, and because I optimized it and I changed the way the vertexes were inside the mesh, we basically destroyed our point order, and we basically ruined this this point cache in Cinema 4D. This is the exact same concept with the MDD. It's basically a PLA deformer, and it requires that the vertexes and the point order all matches, which is the reason why you have to use the same OBJ that you exported out with. In this case, we are using the same OBJ. The only issue is probably our point scale. It's too high. I found that a point scale of 1 seems to work. We basically have a 1-to-1 scale from Soft Image to Cinema 4D here. There's no scaling up of our animation data, so that's perfect. If we set that to 1 and we basically do it for every MDD deformer we create, we'll basically be able to get the exact animation as it was in Soft Image. And as you can see, we've got our animation here in Cinema 4D, and it's driving our face quite nicely. Alright, so let's go ahead and create some more MDD deformers. We're basically going to hold control and duplicate this onto every single face object to basically get all our face objects to inherit their deformations. With the tongue selected, we're going to go ahead and select its MDD cache. And we didn't really animate the tongue much, but had we animated the tongue, that deformation would certainly come in. You can see in here you've got options for the start and end keys, so you can use this to adjust the keys that you want to bring in here in Cinema 4D if you didn't already do any adjustments in Soft Image. Let's go ahead and bring in the jaw. And this is the lower jaw that we're working on here, so let's bring in the lower jaw's point cache. Then we got the upper jaw. Let's bring in the upper jaw's point cache. The right eye, in case we did any eye animations, we didn't. And the left eye, in case we did any left eye animations, and we didn't really do any of those either. Alright, so all the objects should be together, and the jaw is moving with the mouth, and everything's looking great, with the exception of the fact that we don't really have very good overall deformations per se. And that's mainly due to the fact that we didn't do anything with the envelopes and stuff in Soft Image. But if we render this, you can already see that we've got a lot more expression. We've got a lot more movement of the face. We've got puffy cheeks going on. There's just nuanced animation that we just did not get with Breakle. And that's because the marker data that FaceShift derives is just much more diverse. Alright, so that's pretty freaking awesome. Alright, so the issue remains, how can we attach this to what we did in Cinema 4D and Motion Builder? How can we have this face animation, which basically is just, as I mentioned a few chapters earlier, is basically just it's basically just driving just this area of the face. As you can see, all those head rotations that we did, all the head movements that I didn't make it in, which is awesome because we can actually use our motion builder workflow to go ahead and allow our mocap to drive the neck animation, which is probably what we want, and our shoulder animations and stuff like that. And we can actually have the head be attached to the body and basically have the head driven by body capture. We can use Softimage's face robot to just basically drive the blinks, the lip expressions, and the cheek expressions so that we get really good facial deformations, and we get the best of both worlds by using them both together. Okay, so now in order to bake this, we need a plug-in or some Cinema 4 technique that's going to allow us to basically take the body and take the face and turn it all back into one object that has basically the same pretty much point count and pretty much standard objects that the original object had. That way we can use some of Cinema 4D's tools to basically transfer over our weight and our texture maps, and everything will be fine. Alright, so what we're going to first want to do is we're going to probably want to create a version of the body that doesn't have the head. The easiest way to do this is to go ahead and make a copy of test as mesh, and we'll call this test a body. And we'll go ahead and delete the point cache and the weight map and the pose morph tag, and we'll just leave, and we'll actually delete the skin too. And if we turn back on our main mesh, we should see that the body pretty much is in the same spot that the head is. If we go ahead and actually turn off main mesh and just kind of remove the body from that layer, we can basically get a situation here where we basically got just that body mesh and not test as mesh itself here in the viewport. Anyway, in order to be able to select just the body, because right now this body mesh actually has her face attached, or basically her face is Testa's face from Softimage is basically in the same place that the body's face is, and this body has the face still attached to it. We need to basically remove the head. To do that, what we can do is we can use a technique where we either replace the color on the body or replace the color on the face. I'm thinking in this particular case, since all the other face components pretty much have the same exact tags as the face, we can go ahead and just mess with the face. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our face material, and we're going to hold control, drag over, and create a new face. And we're basically going to just do something weird to our face material. I think making it pink is going to make it obnoxious enough that we can see what we're doing. And we're basically going to drag this material over top of all these face materials here on the Softimage's face object. So as we drag these materials on, what's going to end up happening is eventually our face is going to turn completely pink. And honestly, if we in chapter 2, if we had done this, we had to consider this workflow while we were making face selections. This would have been as easy a matter of just deleting the whole entire face selection. But since we don't really have that selection available to us, we're gonna go ahead and do it this way. All right, and then just turn off those turn on those stoplights, and basically what we've got now is we've got a pink area defined that's Testa's face, and then we've got the Testa body, which also has a face as well that has the normal material. What this allows us to do is in face mode, we can actually use our left and right bracket keys to go ahead and, with our live selection tool turned on, we can actually increase our brush size, turn off only select visible elements for a moment, and basically we can just go ahead and wipe out the head. And if we move around our model, we can kind of get a good idea of what we have selected. I'm gonna go ahead and hit Control here and just knock a few of those polygons off to basically not have too much get deleted. And then if I come in maybe this way, or if I come in from another angle, say the right, hit S to frame in my model, I can come in with the Shift key and just add to the selection here, basically adding more of the face, knocking out the jaw, the eyes, knocking out the top of the head, and just basically leaving the neck alone. Basically don't want to select any of the neck, really, because we want to get imprecise with that. Alright, so in perspective mode, we can come in here and see what we got. Looks like we've got a pretty good selection from our right hand view. Look like we got a pretty good pick of everything. So we're gonna go ahead and hit delete. And what we can see now is that because we made the face pink, we can really get a good idea of where exactly we need to cut off the rest of these polygons. So we can come in and we can set our display to go add shading here in our right view, and we can go ahead and just select more polygons here and kind of sort of just wipe out everything else that needs to be wiped out. Now if we come back to our perspective viewport, we pretty much just about got everything we needed. We're going to turn off only select visible elements, or we're going to turn it back on rather. And what we'll do now, we'll come in with a small brush, pressing the left bracket key, kind of similar to Photoshop. We'll just basically deselect these two polygons because I'm not entirely sure that those need to be selected. And everything else looks good. We don't need any of these other ones, so we're going to go ahead and delete those as well. Now we can kind of see what we're working with here. Okay. It looks like if I go ahead and turn off Testa body, it looks like the neck actually comes down all the way across here. So we can go ahead and select these final polygons here and wipe them out. Let's pan around our model, make sure we didn't select anything else inadvertently, and it looks like we didn't. So delete those two, and we've pretty much got a clean selection of the body. Alright. So now what we can do is we can combine these objects together. Let's go ahead and delete all the materials off of test his face. That'll leave us with gray. We could have probably done this originally in the first place as well. That would have gave us the color that we were looking for also. It just needed to be a different color than the body material. So also we could just tell the difference between the two. Figure out what we needed to cut. But we can go ahead and control and drag all these on test the tongue back onto her head, and we've pretty much got her head back to the color it needs to be. Beautiful. We've still got the animation basically on her head, and we've got the body by itself with no skin. So now what we can do is we can select the deformer, select the face, select the body, and we can use a plugin called Nitro Bake. And what Nitro Bake does is it allows us to bake in multiple objects with multiple deformers into one object. Something that we just cannot do in Cinema 4D alone. This plugin is really powerful to bake just about anything into a single object, whether it be point level animation, whether it be bone animation, whether it be textures, whatever you can think of in Cinema 4D. This plugin will bake it all into one single object with point level animation. Just pretty amazing. The only issue with this workflow, of course, is we're going to lose our weighting, but we can get that back using another technique. So with all of these selected, if we go ahead and hit Control S to basically save out our file before we go ahead and do this, we can go ahead to plugins and hit Nitro Bake. And Nitro Bake, what we want to do is we want to keep the original objects. This way we can bring in more animation from a soft image later, and we have the body separated now, so we can use that to basically bake again in the future. We're going to basically create a point animation, have all of our animation just get baked out to a point cloud, and we're going to keep the objects, and we're going to make this whole animation, we're going to make this whole entire model into a single model, and we'll hit Nitro Bake. And what Nitro Bake's going to do is it's going to go through our whole entire timeline. It's basically just going to bake all the polygons and everything that it sees in these two objects. It's just basically going to bake it all down into one object. And this takes a significant amount of time, depending upon your animation, depending upon how much it's got to bake. Take under or so. So I'm going to pause the movie and we'll come back after it's finished. So it's done, and what Nitro Bake does is it creates a null called Nitro Bake, and it puts your polygonal model underneath that null, and you basically got a model that's whole and completely together. The body is now attached to the head. Now, on occasion, and this happened to me, the body position and the head position just weren't quite exactly the same, and when I baked, basically the vertexes where the neck and the body were supposed to be attached, they basically were offset by quite a few centimeters here in Cinema 4D. So you could go through and basically select with your live select tool. You can select each one of these points and basically do an optimize, because they were pretty far off. You can basically go down to optimize and hit this little icon here, and that'll bring up your optimize options. And then in your optimize options, you could set the tolerance up And if you only have two vertexes selected, that'll weld them together without actually messing up the rest of your model. You could try to do an optimize also without selecting anything. And if they were right on top of each other, they should optimize. But in this particular case, they weren't exactly on top of each other. So that optimized workflow where I can just optimize straight out and not have to worry about anything just didn't work. But alright, so that's pretty much it. We now have a model that pretty much has the facial animation and it's all one model. So now, because the point counts are the same, we can actually go ahead and use our previous workflow. We can create a point cache and store the state and go ahead and calculate it. And now the point cache is going to run through and pretty much calculate out all of our animation and bake it down into a point cache tag for us. Alright, so the point cache is done. And now what we want to do is we just want to be able to get the rest of the animation back on this character. Alright, so in order to do that, well, first let's expound on our problem. Our problem is we lost our weight maps. So we have none of our weighting, and we lost our pose morph, so we don't have any of our morph capabilities to be able to add more expression to the face here in Cinema 4D from our original Daz figure. We basically lost everything by doing this workflow, and at one time that used to terrify me because, you know, this workflow basically breaks the original reason why you would have Daz in the first place. You basically, you didn't lose any of your textures. That's nice, all your hard-won textures from Daz, but you did lose your bone system, and that bone system allows you to very easily go into Motion Builder, as you saw in the previous tutorial, and quickly animate. So how can we get the best of both worlds here? Well, there's a powerful tool in Cinema 4D called Vamp. It's the Vertex Map Manager, and it basically allows you to transfer almost all the maps from one object to another object. The objects can be completely different. They can have different point counts. They can have different topologies, and it'll pretty much send everything over really nice. In this particular case, we've got a model that pretty much has pretty much the same point count, slightly different because of some of the optimizations we did with the optimization command and some of the stuff that we did to reconnect everything together. This model has a slightly different point count than the original, so we can't just drag the point cache tag over to test a mesh and get this to work. So anyway, what we want to do is we want to do a few things first, and we could have done this in chapter 2 to make our workflow easier for actually cutting the face, but I'm going to show it to you guys here. Basically, when we transfer over the weight maps, we're going to get a really distorted and disjointed animation out of this figure if her position and her pose doesn't match this figure's position and pose. So anyway, this figure's position and pose is messed up due to the fact that in Motion Builder the T-pose starting position was slightly offset, as you can tell by this base bone here. So what we can do is we can go ahead and delete the motion from this animation here in our motion system. We can always bring it back by dragging the walk run MS as I showed you in the motion builder tutorial. You just drag that back and we get our motion back. With that motion gone, we don't have anything driving the original figure anymore. And if we return back on the main mesh, you could see the original figure here. We're also going to want our joints and our rig components on, so I've turned those on as well. So we've got our joints. And there's a command in the character panel, or the character menu here, called reset pose. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to select all of the bones. So we'll select Genesis root bone, and then we'll just hit our middle mouse button, select all the bones, and we're going to go ahead and do a command reset pose. And basically what that's going to do is just we're going to reset all the bones to the bind pose. Now to be fair, when I wrote chapter 2, I hadn't actually discovered this command yet. So that's a really great command to actually get us back to T-pose, and we don't have to use the techniques that I described in the motion builder and Cinema 4D training to actually try to get back to a bind pose. Although it is a good idea, especially if you're going to be moving to a different tool than Cinema 4D, it is a good idea to have your T-pose save probably on a separate frame, you know, just so you can get back to your T-pose that way. Resetting your pose this way might not always work out the best for you. But now that we have her basically set back to the exact same pose as the main figure is in the base T-pose as well. Or not the main figure, but the face robot nitro baked figure is in the same T-pose as well. Now we can transfer over the weight maps, and when we transfer over the weight maps, we're transferring over this bind pose. And so they'll both have a nice base pose that matches. Alright, so with the main mesh hidden now and only the nitro baked mesh selected, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go into Manager and go into Vamp, the Vertex Map Manager. We'll drag in the null as the target for the maps, and we'll drag in the test a mesh as the source. And as you can see here with the Vertex Map Manager, it's very powerful. We can pretty much copy all of these tags, UVs, texture tags, which we don't really need because our textures came out pretty well from Nitro Bake, but if we wanted to, say, get the exact UVs that we had on Test as Mesh, we certainly could do that. We certainly get its texture tags as well. You might actually want to do that to have a completely clean mesh that has the exact same UVs. Let's go ahead and do that and see how that works out actually. So let's do some prep work here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to delete all of the materials and the UV map. We'll keep all the selection tags, even though we could transfer those as well. We'll keep our point cache, as that defines our face robot animation. And now she's pretty much got nothing, so we lost all of the benefits of DAZ, except for the fact that we do still have the model itself with its nice topology. Alright, so go back into the character menu manager, Vamp. We'll go ahead and drag in the null as the target. We'll drag in test as mesh as the source. we'll do joint weights, UVs, texture maps, and we'll do the pose morph tag. And we'll go ahead and transfer maps and see how that comes out. Alright, and it looks like she got all the tags. If we go ahead and swap some tags around, I like to have these before the materials. And actually, okay, so they did move, just took a second. And I like to have the UV tag after the materials, so place that there, but before the selection tags. And it's looking like everything transferred over. But for some reason, her maps are broken. Okay. And actually, we're going to need to turn off the main mesh in our render. And we're going to need to turn off the face robot in our render as well. And the joints and rigging components don't have to render, but they don't render anyway. But just to be on the safe side, we'll turn those off as well. And yeah, we didn't really make it out as well as I would have liked. We lost all our textures. So yeah, we could rectify that by just keeping the UVW maps that were generated from NitroBake. So if we hit Control Z a couple of times, and we could probably play with that a little bit. I'll leave that to you guys. You guys could probably play with that a little bit and try to see why the texture maps didn't exactly work out the way they were supposed to. But alright, we're back to basics here. Everything's in the correct bind pose and all that, so let's go ahead and do a character, manager, vamp, drag the null into the target, drag test this mesh into the source. We'll just do just the joint weights and the morphs. We'll leave everything else alone. Go ahead and transfer maps. And that's great. Alright, so we've got our pose morph tags, and we've got our weight map. Now if we hold shift and then double click on the weights, the weight tag, we get the weights manager. And in here, you can go ahead and just see what our weights look like. If we click on, say, the chest, we can see that, yeah, we've got pretty interesting weighting there. It looks like it's you know, non-traditional weighting. It doesn't look like it's automatic weighting. It looks, you know, like, you know, there's some translucency here, and you know, different areas are weighted differently, like it came from, you know, a different program like DAZ. And in fact, we look at our right shoulder and our left shoulder, let's see that, yeah, the weight painting looks like it's pretty good. Looks like it did a good job. Go to our head mesh, we can see that yeah, we've got a nice little weight paint of the head. And yeah, everything looks like it came through. Because this is on bind pose, we can also go ahead and, since we've got the weight map, we can go ahead and add the deformer that the weight map works with, which would be the skin deformer. And we can go ahead and add that as a child of the null. We can go ahead and bring in Testa's walk run animation here in our motion system. Go ahead and drag it to 0. And what we should see is she should animate just fine. Because those weights are mapped to her body in the exact same places that they were mapped on the original mesh, she gets the animation just fine, except now you'll notice that she also has the facial animation as well. So she's actually walking and talking, and everything's joined together. We can move the neck around now, and her facial animation should follow just fine. Let's go ahead and click on the neck here, go to our rotate tool, and go ahead and you know, just make sure our neck is good. Make sure there's no points that are, you know, messed up. Check out our weighting. Our weighting looks amazing. Everything looks great. We've got her talking. We've got her expression looking great. And as I mentioned earlier in the tutorial, there are benefits weighting wise. If we shift double click on the weight tag again, you'll notice that the head is basically painted out for the whole entire head, and some of the neck area. This basically creates that nice transition between the head rotations and the neck rotations here. But this painting, well, depending upon what you're trying to do, but in the way I like to animate the head, yeah, this painting is wrong. The head joint actually technically shouldn't have any weight at all. It's really kind of sort of just like a helper joint that just allows everything to kind of rotate with the neck. But really, if we come down in our stuff here, the upper jaw really should be this upper part of the head, and then the lower jaw should be the mouth and the tongue and some of the lower areas. Now, the lower jaw itself is 100% should be 100% weighted to this joint. So by having it as a separate object, we have the ability to be able to basically weight it 100% and not have to worry about trying to create unique selections and try to do interesting things to try to get a clean selection of that jaw. Same thing with the upper jaw, same thing with the tongue, same thing with the eyes. We can weight the eyes 100% to left eye, right eye area, and we don't have to worry about trying to work around some of the geometry. So that's the reason why I didn't nitro bake these together into the object, because we can use these separately to not only create really great weights, but also to have really fine control over them. As we get into the ZBrush workflow, having these separate also means that we can use them as subtools in ZBrush, and we can subdivide them separately and add separate detail, add separate texture to them, without having to do weird polygroup stuff to them as well. So because of their delicate and detailed nature, these components really should be separate from the mesh. And with Nitro Bake and with Vamp, we can actually separate those components out and still be able to keep our DAS weighting, which allows us to get a jump start on our animation, we can come in the motion builder and we can quickly create body animation, and we don't have to worry about destroying our model and losing the ability to be able to do different things. We can take our model completely apart, we can separate it, bring it all back together, and we can still have the same weights and still have our jump start, and not have to worry about going into the intense process of trying to weight stuff in Cinema 4D. Although I will be teaching you guys how to do exactly that in a future tutorial. But anyway, that's it, guys. With this point cache on our model, if we go into our timeline here, we can go ahead and delete the PLA track. And we should still have all of our motion. Alright, let's see what happened to our point cache. Guess what we'll do is we'll go ahead and bring back our PLA. And go ahead and delete this point cache tag, and if we recreate it, right click, character, point cache, store her state, and then go ahead and calculate out the point cache. In this particular case, we're gonna get her whole entire body animation though, so I'm gonna let this run, and I'll get back to you guys in a second. Alrighty guys, so we're back, and basically what I did was I deleted the point cache. I reset the character to the bind pose by just doing a reset pose. I removed the motion system animation from her, and then reset it to the pose, to the base pose. And then I re-added the point cache, right click, character tags, re-add the point cache. And I did the point caching from the base pose, the base T pose. Next, I re-added the animation back onto the character again by just dragging the motion system back onto the layer here. And now, following that workflow, we now have a character that has facial animation that is driving the face, and she's also able to walk, and the facial animation is, you know, following her walk cycle just fine. It's basically following the head movements. You know, so we're getting this nice neck rotation, these nice head movements, and the animation is sticking and we're not getting any weird animation distortions. Alright, and just to show you guys here, there's no PLA animation on this object anymore. It's all on this point cache, which we can turn on and off to basically enable and disable our facial animation. Alright, now in SoftImage, you're probably going to want to have a couple of frames of base animation, and right now we've actually destroyed our base face animation as well, and it's not going to be very easy for us to get it back per se. What we could do is we could go through the whole entire process of actually baking the test of body and the test of face back together again without the MDD deformer. But then, yeah, we don't have the MDD deformer. So the best way to do it probably would be in SoftImage to go ahead and just add a few extra keyframes of neutral face pose. That way you can have just a neutral face pose of her prior to actually even starting this workflow. That way you can have a model that has a nice neutral face pose, and then when you come back in and you set everything up, everything will work just fine. Following the techniques here, you should end up with a model that pretty much has the same exact point and face count every single time. So technically you shouldn't have to nitro bake if you nitro bake your model, you should be able to take the point cache from that new nitro bake and move it to this nitro bake, and you can basically have multiple point caches there, and keep all the extra changes you make to this model. Now, you know, your new you decide to create new weighting for the lower jaw and upper jaw so that you can manipulate those and create, you know, more exaggerated facial animations. If you come over here to the point cache, you've already got your point cache, and you can use it to actually play around with her lip puckering right here. Actually, it doesn't appear to be working. It worked for me before, but yeah, you should be able to layer the pose morph tag on top of the point cache. Maybe the order of operations works. Either way, the bone deformations definitely will work. So, and I know this works too. Just not entirely sure why it's not right now. But that's pretty much it. If you want your face robot animations and your motion builder animations to work together, you can use this workflow to get the job done and create really convincing character animations. Alrighty, so yeah, that's it for me, guys. It's been a pleasure teaching you guys again. I'm looking to next week to go ahead and do the workflow for ZBrush and Cinema 4D. All right, so look forward to that one. It's coming soon. Definitely before the end of the month. All right, and until next time, guys. Take care.